by manipulating energy intake on the mother, that's how you change how the fetal is it's developing the central of appetite, and that's where it works. And I try to prove that. I try to prove it, and I try to prove it, and I'm still trying to prove it, and science told me that I'm wrong.
Welcome to another episode of the Beef Podcast Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Dr. Stephanie Hansen. I'm a feedlot nutritionist at Iowa State University and going to have the pleasure of chatting with one of my compadres here today in the feedlot world, that we're going to talk about more than just the feedlots. So Alejandro Relling is at the Ohio State University. He's an associate professor in the Department of Animal Sciences, and he has a DVM from Argentina, and we're going to talk about that in detail, and then a master's and PhD in animal science from the Ohio State University. So we're going to kind of cover a variety of topics here today, Ali, but we're going to start out with, tell us how you got here. How did you get involved in the beef industry?
Kind of funny. Like most of the things happen in life, you finish where the wind put you, kind of. So that's something that I didn't tell you. My father is a chemical engineer, and he worked in the oil industry. So every time that there was a new petroleum find in Argentina, he moved to that country or to that state, province. So we were moving every 2 years. And when it was my time to decide what I want to be in life, I'd say, no, I just don't want that. I like to live with, like, my grandpa. He had farms and was a farm manager. So I want to learn agriculture. And I went to a specific high school that was a mix between a high school and associate degree. So once 1 year more than a normal high school, and 3 hours per day more. So in the morning we have what a normal high school will have, and in the afternoon we cover a lot of things oriented to agriculture. Beef production, horticulture, crop management. And I was living with my grandparents. When that finished, I knew that I wanted to work on animal production. And I love it. It's just passion on that. And in Argentina, that's where I'm from, you can do a Bachelor of Science with specific, area with major and minor. You go directly to a professional school. And so there were two choices, agriculture or vet school. And in agriculture, it's like, I didn't want to study all the scientific names of corn and soybean, all the pests and all it's okay, I'm going to go to vet school. And that showed how ignorant I was, because I didn't realize that in vet school, I had to study pharmacology, microbiology, virology, things, and all the clinical part. 2/3 of the career were clinical animal production, animal biology. So, okay, I was very goal oriented. I wanted to finish, and I got my DVM. But when I finished, I just didn't know how to use most of the content. I have no clue what was the chemical composition of the feeds that I wanted to feed, but I knew the physiology. So that leads me a little bit onto where I am. In between that, so as soon as I finished that, I was able to get a work and travel, and I went to Minnesota. They have a Minnesota agriculture student trainee, where you are 9 months working in a farm, and then sometime at the university, and that's where I learned English. I learned English in a dairy farm in northern Minnesota. And I speak as I talk. You will see that if you read some of my things early on. It's just I learned in the middle of a farm, and that's how I write. But when I went to the university, I realized that there was something extra that I was never had the chance. That was that research, the opportunity to read papers, and the knowledge was just as new as it could come. I went back to Argentina, and I decided that I wanted to go to grad school. So life gave me the chance to do a master's degree. So I did a master's in animal science and a PhD in nutrition. The funny part, as I said, every feedlot nutritionist will think, what the heck is he doing here? I started my master's degree in dairy nutrition. and on the effect of very physiology. Of course, that's my background as a veterinarian. I knew how an animal works. So I started to study the hormone controls of intake, how different hormones, how through nutrition we can manipulate hormones and how those hormones change how much the animal eat. It was a beautiful master's, and the follow-up was to try to do some research on infusing the hormones. And with that, it's like, okay, we start to do some math, and we need 64 animals that we were going to infuse and kill them and remove the hypothalamus, trying to understand what was on the central control of appetite. And my advisor saying, no way we're going to do this right now. And so that's why I switched to sheep, and we started to do some research in sheep and some very basic and some apply. And in the middle of that, who was my advisor, moved from university and stayed working with Steve Lurch. Steve Lurch, it was at this time the feed and sheep nutritionist here at Ohio State. And with that, I got involved in my research, but whatever all the other, we were 4 PhD students at that time working on the lab. So I started to learn on that. So because of those colleagues and Steve pushed me where I am right now. When I finished my PhD, I was able to get back to Argentina, and they were looking for a beef position, not sheep, beef nutrition. So a little bit what I heard from ears and all that, I was able to take that position, and I was in Argentina 5 years. And when Steve Lurch retired and they opened the position here at Ohio State, I was able to apply and come back. So it was a little bit of serendipity that finished to where I am right now.
We have a time and labor-saving product for you. Beef and Dairy Agrislat by Healthy Farms is your solution. No more lugging jugs around the barn every month. With Beef and Dairy Agrislat, you simply drop the slat through the floor twice a year, and it works to break down solids, reduces crusting and forming. To learn more, visit myhealthyfarms.com.
I think that serendipity happens more time than not in this industry, especially for anybody listening who doesn't completely know how the academic system works. When my position that I'm in now came open, Alan Trinkle had been in that position for nearly 40 years, right? There was a once in a generation lifetime to become the next feedlot nutritionist at Iowa State, because we have kind of a small but mighty group. And, I never even intended to come back to my home state, let alone be back at my alma mater in terms of where I did my bachelor's degree. So I can appreciate your serendipity of going back and forth. So I have a question for you before we start talking about some of the research you're doing there. You were talking about your graduate work being focused on factors affecting feed intake. And feed intake is fascinating to me. It's one of my favorite topics to teach in both our digestive physiology of ruminants grad class, but also our advanced nutrition class for undergrads. And I love teaching them about things like neuropeptide Y and the differences there. So I'm curious with your interest in fetal programming that we're going to talk about here in a second. Is there any evidence that feed intake of offspring, and specifically some of those hormonal controls, can be correct or can be affected by like maternal plane of nutrition?
Have you heard that when you have a hammer, you see everything as a nail? So as soon as I came back, that's where I went. By manipulating energy intake on the mother, that's how you change how the fetal it's developing the central of appetite, and that's where it works. And I try to prove that. I try to prove it, and I try to prove it, and I'm still trying to prove it, and science told me that I'm wrong. So I will not say that there is not something, and of course, you appreciate that the science has what we want to do, and then what we can do, and then how we get the funding for that. So on that particular part, we have some data on offspring hypothalamus, and we saw some differences on POMC expression on the hypothalamus. So POMC is a neuropeptide that there are two pathways on the hypothalamus. Then it's stimulate intake, that is MPY, and agouti related peptide, and the other one is POMC and C-carb that decrease intake. And we saw some changes on that. Now, we are working on and on some RNA sequencing of hypothalamus, and the story doesn't go all in that way. At least in the model that I try, that I have different nutrients, I work more with lipids, or in that area, it doesn't go through that. It may be when you work on the different models with a high intake and low intake mother, so in a restricted mother, it might be offering in that. But when you're talking about just animals that meet the requirements and you change nutrient compositions, probably with minerals will happen something similar. I don't think it's going to go through the hypothalamic regulation. It maybe go to the response to other factors. I'm trying to understand that, and I'm stuck with that. We have, I don't know, just with fatty acids, I think it's more than 15 works on fatty acids and different tissues, and trying to understand why the offspring of polyunsaturated fatty acid grow more than the monounsaturated if it's in late gestation, not in middle, and it's less if it's in early gestation. We're trying to understand that, and the response goes for other parts. And it's not even, we don't know if it's just absorption. That's some of the data that we're maybe changing, but I don't think this one. And again, I want to go back to the hypothalamus and expression of intake, but my model right now, it doesn't go there.
It's really interesting. I have observed lines of cows where if you have a cow who's a really aggressive eater, her calves will be like that. It doesn't matter who daddy is. The calf is always like the first one at the bunk, and they just kind of, they're a vacuum, right? They just suck up all the feed, and they're like, I will digest this later, because right now I just want to beat the other cow out of the feed. And then there's like the more timid ones who you watch them and they pick and they have this little mouthful, and then they kind of look up and they get distracted and like feed flies away because they're like, well, look, a butterfly. And then they go back and take another mouthful, and you're like, dude, focus, because you're not going to be any feed left when you're done. Like, I assume that comes back to intake drivers.
I think it's problem, but I don't know. Again, the thing is, and this is something that I always talk, it's like most of the animal has the drive to eat on, always on. What we have is shut-offs of system, don't eat that much. The question, if it's that on, it's always full pedal or half pedal. And that aggressive eater will start eating, and then they will have all the alarms like stop, stop, stop. The other one will be always on. The off button will never shut off. But the question is why it doesn't have that moving forward to eat that much. And I think that's where all the other aspect may be associated with behavior that we don't understand that much. We talk about a timid, a shy, or a extroverted animals, and that may have an impact. I don't know. The other thing that we have a problem when we study how much an animal eats compared with human is that we are talking and it's close to dinner time, but it's not dinner time, and we're not concerned if we're going to eat, because we know that dinner time we will have our meal. They kind of have the feedback in front of them all the time. So they can express different eating behaviors that we are more, not that we don't have them as human beings, but we are just more restricted because we don't have, unless we're snacking all the time, we don't have that. So when people study intake in human, that is where it's the most amount of work, I think they have a completely different model because of that, having the presence of feed in front of them or not. I would like to see in human, if you put them in a resort, they all inclusive, and they have snacks everywhere all the time. That's where I want to study regulation of intake. Not when they have just one meal and they eat really fast or very slow one meal. And I think that's a problem that we have in cattle, and it makes it harder. There are many of these studies where they infuse the hormones. For example, there are some studies where the Amy Wards-Luce with Relling infusion. As soon as she infused them, intake tank. But when she put the entire daily intake, it didn't change. So the animal was able, they stopped now, but they came back later. And most of the studies in non-ruminants, they don't do that. They support a meal and they check that. So that's fascinating too.
That's interesting to think about too, about layering on the effects of things like stress. So if we wean calves and they would rather pace the fence and bawl for mom than necessarily try to eat until they get so hungry and then they just eat a little, or we get new calves into the feedlot and they're stressed or it's a novel feed stuff or whatever, and we struggle with trying to get them to initially eat. And then at the same time, you don't want somebody to come up and just sort out all the corn and create a gut issue and have acidosis. That's all I could think about when you were saying the guy who's got the pedal down and never gets any feedback to say stop eating. It's like, like he's the one that dies when he's the most expensive that he's ever going to be in the feedlot.
Oh yeah, but it's when you say on those, that's where I think it's sadly lack of support to our industry, because we're talking about feeder programming and then management in early life and then finishing, and it's really hard unless it's federal funding to be able to study what happened in combination of things everywhere. You can say during gestation and you compare two things on gestation, the rest the same, or during weaning and two weaning strategies and then the same. But when you have someone that bring cattle on the feedlot, they're going to have different sources. So the maternal nutrition is different, and then they went through different type managements during weaning or so the interaction of those things makes our heart like suddenly we say, but previous study works, and now we're repeating we're repeating these last 120 days. But what happened the previous 200 days? It's really complicated. And now, in the same way that it's complicated, it's job security, because we can try to switch, combination of gestational plus management or management early on, plus management later on, and those interactions. It's harder to, be consistent. But at the end, it's once we have all the possible interactions, we may understand a little bit more of the biology.
So what would you say from the work that you've done there so far would be some of the most interesting findings relative to thinking about maternal nutrition and the impacts it would eventually have on offspring, whether that's carcass or heifers?
So the first one, which is we normally, and this is when we talk about nutrient requirements, we talk about energy. Okay, the requirement of energy will be so many megacalories per day of maintenance based on these body weights, and many, if we want them to gain 3 pounds, 4 pounds this summer. On the maternal part, what I saw is that those values, that you will have a mean and the variation. Okay, you change those. The mean is not going to be never representative. And we need to talk about on the maternal part, more on the where the nutrients come from, not the energy. Does the energy came from proteins? Maybe different that the energy came from starch, maybe different than the energy came from fat. So we might need to start to understand how those differences in nutrients, not just in energy. With that, and that's a little bit associated with what you do, it's okay. We always work on a healthy animal. What if we challenge that animal, heat stress or transport stress, and all that antioxidant mechanism, and that may affect what we think about requirements? We are thinking a healthy animal. No one of us does a research on an animal that is sick. I'm going to take this sick animal and see the nutrient requirement. Yeah, but not always you have that perfect model, and those type of things and the interaction between those things, it's gonna change. So when I think I'm not a modeling, but when I try to understand the requirements, our equations are oversimplistic. And I think we need to change based on all of those other factors, stress, disease, nutrient that come, to be able to have that a more accurate estimate of the requirements of the animal.
I definitely agree with that. That's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. And you mentioned our transit stress work in particular, and that's a great example of it where before we introduce the trucking stress event, we don't have differences due to dietary zinc concentration in that particular experiment that I'm referencing. But then we truck them for 18 hours, and all of a sudden, the ones that were receiving 3 times the NRC recommendation for zinc are off to the races. And they have by far the best post trucking recovery of intakes and performance. And I think there's great examples out there of things like vitamin C. Cattle make vitamin C from glucose synthesis in their liver, but we truck them. And you mentioned antioxidants. Antioxidants tank during trucking, and we improve that, and we see an improvement in response. So I totally agree. I think we're moving beyond the realm of the minimum amount to prevent deficiencies and moving into the realm of understanding the intricacies of what this animal needs and that animal needs, and being much more specific about it.
Yeah. And again, it's just not just during stress or transport. I think that's those little details, on a dam that it's giving partition on delivery. Do they change the requirements based to the day before? You have all these pro-inflammatory effects going on.
Yes.
But we normally don't think as it's on inflammation. It's delivering. Yeah, but do the requirements change, and how we approach them will change the behavior of that animal into their offspring, colostrum production, and that individual maybe take different responses. So that's I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I think another great example of your kind of one of the challenges of what you work on is that it takes a long time. There's a long gestational interval, and it's expensive, right? Because you have to have animals for all of gestation, and then for another 12 to 13, 14 months until that animal's ready for harvest. Or God forbid you want to do heifer work, right? And I mean, that's adds a whole nother,
Yes.
years. But so something like vitamin A, right? Vitamin A, some work there from Ohio State and others have basically shown that if we have too much vitamin A in the finishing diets, we suppress marbling. And yet there's some cool work coming out of places like Washington State and Guelph and others, and we've had them on the show. Yeah, where if they give it to the young, they improve marbling later.
I teach endocrinology, and I invite everyone that has something to do the university endocrinology, PhD level. So I went to all the faculty at OSU that may be teaching some endocrinology to invite them to give a class in my class. So everyone. So one lady works on PPRs, okay? And so PPRs are nuclear receptors that lipids binds to them. And when the lipids binds to them, they may turn on or turn off some genes. And then she started to talk that, yeah, but PPRs depend on what time of the gestation they combine with RXR, that is the receptor for vitamin A, or the vitamin D receptor. And there are specific times every cell line that those receptors work together.
Interesting.
Sometimes they agonize and sometimes they antagonize each other. So when do you use vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, or lipids? You may be creating a agonistic model to improve something, or you may be creating an antagonist model just because you don't have the heterodimer, the other part that binds. So instead of creating a solution, you're creating a problem. And so when she mentioned that, I remember exactly that. Dr. Du, we saw the vitamin A and how you change that early on. And then Steve and Francis on vitamin A, that if you feed it too late, again, it's the same nutrient. It's vitamin A, but how it's interacting with our part of the physiology, it's fascinating.
Yeah, that really is. We just did vitamin A this week in class, and I was trying to explain to these like mostly first year master's students how it would be like one same nutrient, but different timing, and you would have a totally different result. And then I was like, but we don't really completely know why.
So we keep the same value. It's been put there in NRC or NASEM now since 60 something, and we're going to continue that because we don't understand. Yeah, I agree with that.
Back to your early point, right? So about trying to improve our understanding of animal nutrient requirements. The animal's not the same as what a lot of those initial studies were done. And actually, like Mary Dranowski's done work on the vitamin A for cows, and she would be like, there's 3 studies that really informed that recommendation. The cow's like mature weight was basically what we wean calves at today. Like, it's just crazy, right? Like the milk production's like not even in the same like scale, just in a million things. But you're exactly right. And this is the same thing that I remember when the swine NRC did their last iteration, and they did a big meeting at Animal Science, and one of the guys stood up there and he said, look, until you people do better research, I can't change the requirements. And he wasn't trying to piss anybody off, but he was basically saying, like, if you're not going to do dose titration studies, right, where you feed multiple levels of whatever you're interested in and you have it repeated at multiple locations, it's really hard to justify making changes to those requirements. And we've got to start getting more creative about how we fund that research, because it's really critical for producers. And it's just not going to happen with the current mechanisms that we have.
No, and again, it's just when you start to put situations. So, are you going to feed to the mother? And I've been talking with a lot of companies that sell these products and say, can you support some of these fetal program in vitamin A? And say, what's the problem? I can give you the product, but you're going to tell me that you're going to put that in the cow to see some benefits on the offspring. And our industry is not integrated. It's not swine, it's not poultry, where the person that spend the money will see the benefits. So how I convince all of my cow producers that they have to do it so the feedlotters have better benefits. And so because industry wants to support research, they want to see their products moving forward, but they have to see a benefit. And that's a part of the problem with this fetal programming, because the company, the person that gains is not the person that is spending.
I totally agree. I mean, the segmented nature is the bane of our existence and perhaps our savior sometimes, depending on the situation, right?
Yeah.
But like in this case, I firmly believe that especially, those farmers or ranchers who are keeping their own animals all the way out through harvest and they're maintaining that ownership, they might have a heck of an opportunity to make relatively small and affordable changes at just the right time in maternal nutrition or developing, nutrition to make a positive impact on that bottom line.
That's the thing is, do we have the support to give them that data? And that's where we are building it, but at the expense of other resources and take a little bit more time. Now, something that you comment on time, and when I moved here to Ohio, my first studies were in sheep, on fetal programming in sheep, because tenure, I have to get tenure, I have to get papers published. So it was a really fast model. But I always admire the group in Florida where they are studying the granddaughters. So it takes a long time to see a granddaughter to produce, not just the daughter, but one extra generation. And it seems that in cattle, in rats, it's 12 generations that you remove this maternal imprinting.
Wow.
In cattle, try to do something like that. In rats, 12 generation, it's a master student thesis, or in year and a half, it's done. For us, if we want to follow 2 generations, it's not a PhD student. It's someone in a career with a good technician. That makes things harder. But if we can show those extra benefits to the producers, you're going to keep your daughter and you will have an extra gain. Suppose that you sell everything, but you keep your replacement. You will have a benefit in your daughter and in your granddaughter. And that's how we may need to convince some of the companies to support the research, because the people that you will sell this product, they will buy it because they will see the benefit. Not the feedlotters, but all of them will see better daughters, better granddaughters.
Well, and it's interesting to think about whether some priorities within the industry will shift in coming years as we've gone to the smallest cow herd since 1961. We're going to start looking towards expansion in the next couple of years, and people are going to start keeping heifers and, think more about heifer development. Like your comment about having to have a one PI or one professor or whoever, PhD plus a technician over a 30 or 40-year career to answer a couple of these generational questions. That's exactly why places like the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center are so important, right? Because that's exactly the situation they have. And that is where a lot of like the really foundational fetal programming work on the beef side has come out of.
Yeah, where you have the structure. At the end, it's finished on that.
So I'm in Iowa. You're in Ohio. We were chatting a little bit before we started talking about some of the similarities and differences. But one of the things that we both deal with, I think in Iowa, we have an estimated 25,000 beef producers. So there's a lot of extension opportunities to try to, make contact with all those individuals. But we might have somebody who has 200 cows and somebody who has 20 cows, or somebody like me who has 2 cows because I only have a handful of acres and a cow problem. So how has that been something that you've dealt with there, Ali, as you've thought about your role there, both on the sheep and beef beef specialist side?
I came in my country. What happens is everyone that had people don't like to live in the countryside because of infrastructure overall. So most of the people go to live to the cities. And what happens is when daddy die, they split the farm. No one wants to do the farming because there are small areas, so they sell it, and so you have huge structures. So I grew up where you have to have at least 1,000 heads to make profit, kind of plus or minus. But that's so everything needs to be. You cannot have a part-time farm. That's not common. So I have that production set in mind, and I'm talking about production. I'm not even talking about show cattle. That's I'm trying to understand that part. When I moved here in Ohio, it's very common, so if you talk with Ohio Cattlemen Association, they are proud that every single county in Ohio has cattle. Every single one. The thing is, the average, I think it's 20 heads per person or less than 20, 90%, 90% has less than 20 cows. That's the average. But you see farms that have 3,000, 4,000. So that means that you have people that have, like your case, 2 or 3. They are part-time farmers. And that was hard for me because I always my knowledge of nutrition was based on what industry was. So what's industry? At least 20 pens of 100 animals. Now I came to Ohio and I live just down the hill from the research center. So it's 3 miles. From here to my house, I go through 2 farms one has 20 shorthorn, and the other one, I think it's 5 cows. And they finish them. So their management of feeding is completely different that you will read in every single. And that kind of forced me, I'm coming with this physiology-oriented biology, trying to maximize biology. And then I have an email or a phone call. It's like, okay, I have these 5 cattle. What do I feed them? These 5 steers that I want to finish them. What do I feed them? What do you have? 5 animals. And they say, okay, tell me your facilities, the farm. You don't have how you feed them. They are in pasture, and I put some hay, and so that kind of trying to maximize their economy or their their economy, but they cannot buy a TMR. Sometimes they produce their own corn and they feed whole corn. They don't grind it because even binding a grinder, it will be a cost that they cannot make up of the grind. So that shift when you need to serve your stakeholders, it changed a lot to the understanding of the biology too. And I always try to maximize before biology. Now I try to maximize producers' goals. And some of my research, so when I started, I always thought it was very physiology journals, now I think that half of my publication goes to very applied, like translation and animal science. It's just how we feed cattle differently and to avoid losses. It's just how much would we lose and how many animals, at what level of animals you need to shift to change technology. So that's a little bit of that new area that I'm learning to on doing now. Um, of course, and we talk about these things on the multi-state meeting. Sometimes it's like, why did you do that? Why you compare those treatments? Just that's because what I have down the street, that's what they do. So I need to show what's the cut-off numbers. If you're not going to have 33 animals with a corn at this price, just use whole corn. If you have, and those are the things that again, it's just fascinating then on how the system work, on how the land grant universities and try to serve the taxpayers. It's part of the fun of this job too.
It is one of the joys, I think, of the mission of the land grant institutions, like we're both at, having that 3 pillars of the stool, right? So having the teaching, the research, and then the extension to extend the research knowledge to the people, right? That was the original design of it. And it's really scary in some places where they're talking about getting rid of extension altogether or changing the model. I even had a guest I interviewed last week, and she's an extension in Kentucky. And we were talking about the fact that, extension is so regional. So what your folks need in Ohio is not the same as what somebody in Florida is somebody in New Mexico, right? Like it's all very regional. And, we owe those individuals the opportunity to maintain their position in the beef industry, right? That's what contributes to the sustainability of this industry.
And that's why some people don't realize the beauty of the interaction between extension teaching and research. It's just, if I don't have an extension, I'm 80% research, 20% teaching. So if I don't have anyone from extension that sit with me and drink coffee and discuss problems or invite me to a talk with producers, you never see what are the problems. And when you interact with someone in extension or people that the extension can do their research to fill those gaps, then you can take it to the classroom. And with the interaction with people in our universities, okay, so if you're going to work in Ohio, this is going to be your problem. But look what happened. I have a friend in Iowa, I have a friend in Florida. They may see the problems different. So how you need to be solved. So it's not that you don't have a recipe in a book of how to feed. Okay, where you are, what your resources, and try to understand that. And that's, again, it's just the beauty of the system. And I would be, if someone say we need to remove the extension, I don't know. Nowadays, I would maybe change teaching. I would put YouTubes, but I will, the interaction with the problem, the people that have the problem, you have to have a direct interaction.
Well, that should make the handful of folks who have 3-way appointments between research, teaching, and extension feel better, because they're really important, right? They have apparently 3 feet because they have a foot in each of those fields.
I always say that even that we are in a place where we create knowledge, we are really not using it. We are one of the few people that say that we give 150% of our time. When we talk about 100%, that's the maximum. But these people give more than 100% because they have maybe, they cannot be, they may be 50 on each one, even that the appointment is 30, 40. But just they need to split to be able, and they do it. And probably, many of us that have only 2 appointments, we do the 3rd one because we consider it important, so that we don't know where we take that time off, but we do it. Just, it's part of it. It's make it the fun of it.
Absolutely.
It's time for our famous 3.
Well, we're nearing the end of our time here together, so are you ready for our famous 3 questions?
Indeed, I am.
Okay. First question, what's your favorite beef-related resource?
I cheat on that. I use my unique opportunity, but what I use is every time that I'm offered to review a manuscript on research, I take it. if I check my calendar, probably not everyone, but I try every type of paper that gets to revision. As peer reviewers, we are asked to review papers, and I read the topic and I use them for learning. In that way, I have the information 3 months before it gets published. So that would be my main fun part of getting. As basis, I use the NASEM or former NRC, and I use one from the Spaniards one that is FEDNA, the Spanish Federation of Animal Nutrition. Very simplistic. It goes directly to the point, but to keep update, it's just review papers.
Nice. I like that. Okay, second question. What's something not related to beef that you're enjoying right now?
So something that I enjoy is sport activities with my kids.
Okay.
I'm that father that goes to every single opportunity that my kids have something. And I last year said I'm not gonna coach my kids anymore. And they were missing some coaches this year and for spring events and say, do you mind to? Oh yes, I'm gonna be there. So I'm passionate of sports and I try to put that in my kids, and sometimes they are not as daddy, you can be a little more quiet. But yeah, and that's how I put my 7,000 steps per day. So I do my exercise, I release energy, and I have fun on that. Yeah.
So what are they playing?
So I have many kids, so we limited how much they can do. So fall and spring, they do soccer, and winter and summer, they do swimming.
Do you coach swimming too?
No. Oh,
stay afloat.
yes. The thing is, I never had formal training on swimming, and my 4 olders are on the swimming team, and the second and the third are really good, to the point that the third one is so far 3 times champions in butterfly. He's 9, so still a long way to go. But to them that are really good, they won. I never won any competition, and he got already 3 state champions. And I tell him, you have, when you go in, your arm needs to be 45 degrees. All the theories are here, so I record them and I show them. I'm not the coach, but I cannot stop. One day I say, okay, let's race me, and I don't know how to swim butterfly.
That's awesome.
And so after that, it was okay, you're right. Yeah. No, soccer, yes. Soccer, it's I'm from Argentina. It's probably So that's imprinted on the genome. Yeah.
I was gonna ask. I was gonna say. I assume that they play soccer, but I just I better not assume.
Yes. No. And the thing is just because I have too many kids. I have many kids. When they ask me can we do other things? It's not. We are gonna go one season, everyone to the same spot. And if you like something else, sorry, until you don't drive, you cannot do it, because I cannot take one to basketball, one to gymnastics, one to soccer, one to...
I like it. There's a lot of efficiency in your plan. I think that's your theme, Ali, is efficiency.
Yeah. I think it's not become crazy. It's just you want to do something, that's the only limitation. Yeah.
Okay, final question. What's a trait of someone you know that's helped make them successful?
So there are 2 things, and I got them from my two advisors, my master and my PhD advisor. From my master advisors, it's try to read as much, know more than anyone on the topic that you want to do. Have the time to go into the details. Details matter a lot, and try to focus on that. And of course, anyone that is faculty, we love that. And then we have 3 committees to assist, 2 classes to teach, and all those type of things. But that will be something that I always try to go back on. Okay, what I'm missing on the entire picture, which detail I'm not seeing. So that's one of the traits. And the other one is get it done. And no Steve Lurch. Get it done. At one point it's you. And so when I look at the details and I start to get too much stuck and I don't move forward, that's when the stifler kick out of me. It's get it done, okay? And it's time to move, and you cannot continue just thinking on that. So the combination of both on be thoughtful and take the time, but not to the point that gonna stuck me on get it done. I think allowed me to be where I am now.
I think that's a great testament to the value of having multiple mentors.
Indeed, yes, they are so different, and I encourage. I don't want people to do both my degrees or with me. It's just there is so little I can teach them, you know. So try to go somewhere else and different perspective and choose the one that works the best for you. So yeah.
And even thinking about mentors that are, for different aspects, right? Is there somebody who gives a really great presentation that you'd like to learn from? Is there somebody that has a totally different skill set that you want to learn from? And they can be,
On the lab work, and then
they can be informal mentors, right? Like you said, let's grab a cup of coffee and talk about that.
So yeah, those are would be the two traits. There may be many things, but I think those ones are the ones that I would like to be recognized, and yeah, and I know exactly where I get them. Very very clear. It's not that I don't know who taught me to work in the lab or who taught me to give a seminar. No, but these two, before you start a project, read as much as you can and get it done. So yeah.
I love it. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. Thanks so much for being on the Beef Podcast show. Where can folks find you online or any other locations?
My email is like my last name, Relling, Relling, that one at osu.edu. So anyone that will be main point of contact. I have LinkedIn, Alejandro Relling. I don't have many other social medias. And LinkedIn, I check it not often. So if you have any question, any comment, if you want to grab a coffee and you pass by close by Worcester, Ohio, feel free. Then we can go to Certified Angus Beef that is here and see how that works too. But again, I think the email is the easiest way.
Excellent. And if you are in that area, I highly recommend the Certified Angus Beef Tour because that's amazing.
Indeed. They show how the science can be applied to a day-to-day product.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Relling, thanks so much for being with us. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time.